In black and white film footage, thousands of people stand below the Lincoln Memorial. A dark-haired woman faces microphones.
Over half a century ago, contralto Marian Anderson electrified America, singing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. In April of 1939, she hoped to perform here at Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. But the Daughters of the American Revolution who owned the hall refused to suspend their Jim Crow policy barring black performers.
Headlines, artists protest ban on Marian.
When the facts became known, Eleanor Roosevelt publicly resigned from the DAR.
Mrs. Roosevelt quits DAR over Anderson snub.
A few weeks later, Marian Anderson accepted the Secretary of the Interior's invitation to perform instead on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. It was a defining moment in the struggle for civil rights.
Looking out at the packed crowd, Anderson smiles. Next, in color, a bearded man stands outside a columned building.
I'm James DePreist, and Marian Anderson was my aunt. I grew up in a home full of three things: love, music, and dreams. Most of those dreams have been realized, and today I conduct orchestras around the world. But I never imagined that one day I'd become a person with a disability.
Okay, try.
At the age of 26, while conducting in Bangkok, Thailand, I contracted polio. Literally overnight, my world changed. Oh, I was still a young conductor with ambition, but suddenly walking was a challenge. Stairs loomed large, and concert halls without ramps were everywhere.
On a stage, DePreist conducts an orchestra. DePreist sets aside a music stand. A dark-haired man places one hand on DePreist's shoulder. They hug one another.
As obstacles I'd never noticed before became a part of my daily life, I quickly learned that the intentional walls of discrimination and the physical barriers confronting people with disabilities have the same effect. Both deny access.
Next, a bearded man addresses a conference room.
People do not see us as a person. They are afraid of us because we look different.
When people see somebody with a disability, all this stuff kicks in. People's vulnerability about whether or not they might become disabled, or people feeling guilty about the fact that they are not disabled and I am.
A man using a wheelchair lift.
I don't want that pity. Why should I? I'm a human being like everybody else. I don't want to be treated that way.
13 years after that historic Lincoln Memorial concert, the racial barriers came down here at Constitution Hall. But it took another 50 years for other barriers to fall, and it required an act of Congress to make it happen.
George H.W. Bush.
This historic act is the world's first comprehensive declaration of equality for people with disabilities. The first.
The Americans with Disabilities Act was signed by President Bush on the south lawn of the White House on July 26, 1990. This landmark civil rights law gave people with disabilities the same legal rights that other minorities had fought so hard to achieve. Discrimination against people with disabilities is now illegal.
On a stage, President Bush shakes hands with men using wheelchairs. In the audience, a man wearing sunglasses holds up a white cane with a small U.S. flag attached to it. My country.
As an African American, I know the crucial importance of America's civil rights laws. And as a person with a disability, I know that attitudes, not architectural or communication barriers, are at the heart of all discrimination. Laws can change behavior, but they can be no more than a blueprint for changes in attitude. There are currently 49 million people with disabilities in this country. If attitudes of discrimination are to change, it's time America gets to know us as people, not categories. And that is what this program is all about. Meet Kathy Martinez.
In a bowling alley, a dark-haired woman rolls a ball. The ball knocks down bowling pins.
What'd I get?
8.
Cool.
People aren't going to think you're blind.
Many people perceive, when they think of a blind person, they have an image that blind people, live in total darkness.
A gutter ball.
Oh, Jorge.
I've lost my technique.
My vision is pretty limited. I can see pretty much light and dark and occasional shadows, no color.
13-year-old Jorge Cohn is Kathy's godson.
Martinez faces a lane.
Start more on the right side.
She rolls her green ball down the lane.
Oh, that was way too far to the right.
Why didn't you just put in the gutter and roll it?
Now a black and white photograph of a dark-haired toddler.
I was born blind. 2 years later, my mom had another blind kid. Peggy is my sister. She can see a little more than I can. We are the two middle children of 6 kids, and there's no real medical diagnosis.
Photos of the young Martinez sisters.
In the Martinez family's neighborhood of California orange groves, chemical poisoning was suspected but never proved. But whatever the cause of their blindness, Kathy and Peggy were embraced by their family.
My parents were not ashamed of me, and I think for people with disabilities, shame is such a major factor, or, you know, being an embarrassment to their families. And I feel like my parents really, truly, deep down in their souls, were not ashamed of Peggy and I really do.
In 1963, Kathy started kindergarten at her neighborhood school, only after her mother put up a fuss, of course.
My mom did not want us to go to a school for the blind. She treated us like she treated the other kids. We had responsibilities. We had to do the dishes. We had to clean the bathroom. You know, we had to rake the leaves.
But to the rest of the world, Kathy was different.
Come on, Kath. There's nothing to be afraid of.
When she was 10, she was cast in an episode of Lassie.
The storyline was that there was a group of blind kids going on a picnic, and I played the part of a girl who was really timid and really scared and, you know, hadn't been around a lot of active, boisterous kids, and so everything scared her.
What was that? It was just a hawk, Kathy.
And the story kind of unfolds where the girl trips and stumbles and is terrified and just scared of Lassie and scared of moving around alone. And Lassie and the Ranger and I spend the rest of the episode in a situation where I, you know, kind of take my first steps of independence.
Did you feel special? Was it cool?
I got tired of it, frankly, because I was being represented as this super kid.
I made it. I made it. I really made it.
You did. You really did.
Blind children will receive Braille books.
And not just on Lassie. Kathy and Peggy became the darlings of their hometown newspaper. Kathy the blind skipper, Kathy the blind judo expert, Kathy on the Braille Institute swim team, and as a part of the Blind Bikers Club.
I think, once again, it sort of plays into that low expectation thing, where if we do what average kids do, I mean, average kids go swimming, average kids attend judo classes, but if a blind kid does it, then it's something special.
A photo of Martinez in a graduation gown.
I graduated from high school, and I went to the orientation center in January of 1977. And I figured that there were certain skills I did need. My family prepared me very well for many things, but I really needed to learn how to get around in the world independently as a blind person.
A man stir-fries vegetables.
Am I dropping any of this stuff off the walk?
If you did, they're pretty heavy vegetables, and you probably hear them hit the stove.
The Orientation Center for the Blind in Berkeley teaches cooking.
A woman reads Braille.
In melon.
That's it.
Braille.
Should I be feeling the curb?
Yes.
And most importantly, mobility training to 100 people a year.
Good.
But Kathy's experience here went beyond the essentials.
Next, a dorm room with 2 beds and 2 desks.
I remember this room specifically when I think of my awakening to learning about civil rights for people with disabilities, because I remember being here after having been given a pamphlet in Braille, and I remember I couldn't wait to get into the room alone to read it. I remember sitting right here and putting it on my lap and reading, "Come and defend your civil rights."
One of the longest takeovers of a federal building in United States history was now underway.
It is by far the largest and longest protest ever organized by disabled people in this area.
For 25 days, more than 100 people with disabilities took over the HEW building in San Francisco. They were protesting the Carter administration's refusal to enforce Section 504 of the Federal Rehabilitation Act. 504 required that anyone receiving federal money must be accessible to people with disabilities. But 4 years later, virtually none of the country's federally funded schools, hospitals, or transportation were accessible. Tired of waiting for the regulations to be published, protesters in San Francisco and 5 other cities intended to force the issue.
All of a sudden I realized that I wanted to be a part of it. And I had to be very careful because I was a student in this school and I didn't want to get kicked out. So I would go and hang back. I would be on the edge of the demonstrations, and definitely I followed it every day on the news because it was covered daily. And for me it was a real turning point in terms of my involvement in advocating for the rights of people with disabilities.
Noble, moving, and what I believe to be effective effort.
On April 28, 1977, more than 3 weeks after the takeover began, the Carter administration backed down, signing the 504 regulations. It was a key victory for the emerging disability rights movement.
Protesters carry signs.
I think I knew when I was 19 years old in 1977 that I would probably work in the disability advocacy movement.
Now a subway car speeds down a dark tunnel. Martinez sits on a seat. As sunlight shines through a window, Martinez puts on sunglasses.
For almost 2 decades now, disability rights has been at the center of Kathy's life. In 1992, Kathy wanted to organize a support group for women living with HIV and AIDS.
Bunny!
The first person to join was Bunny Knuckles, HIV positive after 32 years of drug and alcohol abuse.
Bunny hugs Martinez.
I said you're in months.
When I met Bunny, she'd been out of prison for about 2 months. I felt like she probably didn't trust me when we initially met. Why should she? And I thought, these women probably think, well, who the heck does she think she is, and what can she teach us? But I thought, you know, the way to do it was just to continue to show up. And I talked about my experience being blind, and we had a lot of common experiences: discrimination, lack of access to certain services, and just kind of people's perception of us as women with disabilities.
The first time I met her, it was like, it was in a room and it was making so much noise. We was laughing, and it was like, well, this woman's not blind, you know. I think she can see. I mean, I thought this, you know. She said, no, I'm blind. I said, you know, and she knew so much she could tell, you know, she could tell me what kind of earrings I had on. She said, oh, you got on new earrings today, you know what I'm saying? And it was like, well, I said, I know if she can do all this blind, and I got eyes, even I just got the virus, that I can survive too, you know. And so she really made me strong.
How's Cheryl Fay?
She let us know that we weren't alone. We had other people caring about us that didn't have the virus, but they had disabilities. Because I think she's on the 14th Street Clinic.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Because they probably haven't known any other blind people, then of course they would feel that my situation was worse because I had a really obvious disability. How is Carol?
She's in this house, what you call it?
AIDS discrimination, though illegal under the ADA, is still rampant in America. Kathy thinks, like most forms of discrimination, it's based largely on fear.
What I see?
Do you see Danita?
No.
Do you see...
Oh, Danita died.
Shut up.
She died. Danita.
How'd she die?
Yeah, she got really sick. And she got really sick when she...
Bunny herself is doing well. She's off drugs, she says, off the streets, and working hard to help not only herself, but other people living with HIV and AIDS.
I want all people, not just me. I'm not for just Bunny. I want anybody that's got a disability or the virus, I feel the same about them as I do about Bunny.
How many of you are familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act? Yes? Say yes. Say no. Yeah?
This morning, Kathy is a guest speaker at Berkeley's Orientation Center for the Blind. She and this group of newly blind students swap stories of discrimination.
You know, one of the experiences I had and thought I was kind of alone with it was the age discrimination. And that was before my sight went. And it was a case of if I was too old to be considered, then they talked to my companion about what I wanted for lunch
Oh,
or
sure.
breakfast.
We've all been through that, too.
And then I experienced it again as my sight went, and my companion got the change for my money.
Too much attention can be equally insulting.
You know, when people ask you if you need help, I think that they genuinely mean well, and I usually accept it. If people assume you need help, that's when I get offended.
I think the whole general public has no clue, you know, of what we can do.
Using white canes, Martinez and a blind woman walk down a sidewalk. The woman feeds a dollar bill into a machine.
There it goes.
Whoa.
You made it work.
Okay.
Bingo. So
I
get your money. It's down to lower, 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 lower. There you go, right there.
Kathy volunteers to be Jerry Greer's mobility coach for the afternoon.
This is the actual BART machine. Now, given that we have change, here's the change slot.
Martinez guides Greer's hand.
Right here.
Okay.
Kathy takes Jerry on a personal tour of San Francisco subway.
And then you just try to make a straight shot. At rush hour, you'll hear traffic.
Ticket in hand, Jerry tries entering the system.
Okay. So we ought to pull the ticket the same time you walk in through the gate, okay?
Okay.
So go. Go, 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 go. There you go.
The women step through a fare gate.
Now.
All right.
You made it.
Jerry lost her sight just last year from glaucoma. The disease blinded her overnight.
And then, are you okay with escalators?
I've never been on one.
Really? Okay.
Together, they navigate their way up the escalator to the subway platform.
At the end of this barricade, you'll go pretty much straight into a door. Now, you can hear where the door's open. Listen. Hear that?
Yeah.
So we're going on, okay?
All right.
Now, this edge detection thing right here means this is the edge of the track. So
Bumpy material lines the edge of the platform.
we're on.
All right.
Next, a grocery store.
You need a shopping cart?
No, I think we can handle it just with a basket.
Okay. Ready? You
Can I
want to
grab
hold on?
onto you?
Yeah.
You got it.
Ready?
You're here now. I want Calistoga lemon.
Okay. Sparkling?
There you go.
Lemon flavor?
You got it.
Okay.
You got it. Here, let's get a couple of
How
those.
many? They only have 2 out here.
Oh, well, that's all we're getting then.
Okay.
Do you help a lot of people here?
Oh, yeah.
You do?
And I help a lot of blind people.
You do?
So it make it fun because, you know, I learn a lot. And I ask them a lot of questions and stuff. They had a dog with them.
Stores like this one recognize that with an aging population, the number of people with disabilities and their buying power will increase. Already, it's billions of dollars a year.
7, 8. Thank you.
Okie dokie. Laura, hi, it's Kathy Martinez from WID. My job at the World Institute on Disability is increasing the participation of people with disabilities in international development.
Right. The changing face of disabilities is a concern of the disability rights movement of it.
This computer allows me to do my job. It allows me to essentially be a productive citizen and pay taxes because
The Americans with Disabilities Act guarantees that Kathy's employers will provide the accommodations she needs to do her job if her requests are reasonable and affordable under the law.
I think this particular speech program was approximately $400. But in comparison to the fact that I pay $8,000 in taxes each year approximately, I think it's a good trade-off.
According to a survey by the Sears Corporation, only 3% of their reasonable accommodations under the ADA cost more than $1,000. The vast majority, 69%, cost absolutely nothing.
A Braille typing machine.
Okay, all clear?
Okay.
Greer uses a table saw.
If disabled people are put into jobs, it's a hell of a lot better for the economy than to keep us down on a dole on which we can barely survive.
Greer measures wood.
Perfecto.
All right.
Perfecto.
The ADA is sort of a capstone on the efforts of people with disabilities struggling for their rights. I mean, it's a huge turning point in the history of people with disabilities.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks, you too.
Using a motorized wheelchair, a woman with short red hair glides away from Martinez.
When I contracted polio in 1962, the Americans with Disabilities Act was just a glimmer of an idea. The country had other preoccupations, among them Vietnam. Meet Huey Walker.
A mustached man snaps off the ends of a green bean.
And the best way to cook these?
How?
You don't want to cook them till they get soggy, so you want to keep them firm. Now, most country people like them soggy, and that's why I grew up with them.
Huey Walker lives only 5 miles from where he grew up.
Shade trees surround large white houses.
Georgetown, South Carolina still looks much like it did before the Civil War. This small southern town has always been the hub of rural Georgetown County.
Storefronts face a street.
Huey's family lived 40 miles out of town, in Conway.
Next, in black and white film footage, people plow fields with mules.
Like most of their black neighbors in the 50s, the Walkers still sharecrop tobacco, working a white farmer's land in return for a tiny share of the profits.
As far back as I can remember, growing up, it was pretty tough. My stepfather was a sharecropper. Didn't make a lot of money. We had a lot of kids to feed.
11, in fact.
Soldiers escort black students.
In the Jim Crow South, schools were segregated. Ku Klux Klan was active, and poor blacks like Huey were careful to know their place.
A huge cross burns.
There were white-only signs everywhere, colored signs. Even at the doctor's office, it said white and colored. The water fountain was white and colored. The movie theater, you had to go upstairs in the balcony, and it was just everywhere.
A neon sign on a brick building, colored balcony. Now a truck drives past the factory.
Georgetown's primary employer was the paper mill. But in 1965, when Huey graduated from high school, the paper mill still had a whites-only hiring policy. For Huey, moving up meant moving out.
There was just no opportunity here. Couldn't afford to go to college at the time. And there was just no jobs available except for farming.
In February of 1966, Huey joined the Army.
A photo of a young Huey Walker.
By September, his platoon was on its way to Vietnam.
He poses with his platoon.
While I was there, I wanted to be a good soldier. I wanted to be out front. I wanted to be their first man, and I was point man for most of the time I was there.
Advancing through the jungle in a V formation, the platoon's point man was the most exposed to enemy fire.
I think at the time, the average point man life then was 21 days, and I lasted about 8 months.
Intense fighting both on the ground, inside the buffer zone, and in the air sends Vietnam casualty figures to a new high.
Within 1 month of arriving in Vietnam, a third of Huey's platoon, 7 of his buddies, were killed by the Viet Cong. Inevitably, the war changed Huey.
It made me harder. It kind of turned my soul to stone. You just kind of lost your heart. You had to.
A corpse lies on the ground. Now 3 men stride across a beach.
The day before he was hit, Huey and his friend, the chaplain, went swimming in the South China Sea.
Men run through waves.
A friend of mine who was Catholic gave me a rosary, and I wore it most of the time when I was in Vietnam. And I took it off that day. And the next day, about 1:30 in the afternoon, I got hit.
Within seconds, Huey and a friend were lying wounded on the jungle floor.
Soldiers fire across a meadow.
He shot me. I went down. He shot the guy behind me. He goes down. He got up. He shot him again. He goes back down, and he shot him again.
The dead and wounded are evacuated to a safe area to await the rescue choppers.
Medevaced out, doctors remove the bullet that lodged near Huey's spine.
Troops carry a soldier toward a helicopter.
He was paralyzed from the waist down.
The helicopter lifts off.
When they finished the operation, I was out for a couple of days, I guess. And when I woke up, it was real hot. And I was kind of afraid to open my eyes. I thought maybe I was dead and maybe I was in hell.
He smiles. In a photo, he grips hand weights.
It wasn't hell, it was rehab. And Huey was lucky to be alive. During his year in VA hospitals, Huey slowly adjusted to his new life.
Next, soldiers carry a casket past an airplane.
I came back in '68. I came home because one of my best friends got killed in Vietnam, and I came to his funeral.
A uniformed man folds a U.S. flag.
The detail that brought him to bury him wanted to eat at a restaurant in Hemingway, and they wouldn't serve the black soldiers.
In Georgetown, the colored-only signs were slowly coming down, but for Huey, new barriers were going up. Steps were a constant problem, but Huey found attitudes even more difficult.
Because the difficult thing, particularly about going out, they didn't know how to talk to you. They'd talk to whoever was with you and ask them about you. Sometimes people come up and give you $1. That happens sometimes.
Walker wheels along a dock.
Oh, look at the alligator.
What?
I'm serious. I'm serious. There's an alligator. It is. Right
No. Oh, y'all need to call the animal patrol.
Probably.
From the time she was little, Huey's daughter Jackie adored her father.
You know, he spent time with me, played softball with me, catch, taught me how to do a lot of things. Even taught me how to fish.
Now a restaurant.
Where we sitting at?
I don't know.
Huey married Jackie's mother Helen shortly after he returned from Vietnam.
Right there.
By the time she was in kindergarten, Jackie was used to her playmates' questions about her father's disability.
You know, how did he get in and out of bed, you know, things like that. And I used to tell him my mother helped him, you know, can he drive? And I used to explain to him when he first got his van, how the thing worked, the handle. They asked a lot of questions, but it's not a stupid question because, you know, people that don't have that handicap, they would like to know, you know, how does he do this, you know, do that. So it doesn't bother me to explain.
Walker drives a van.
I would have loved to have been with her on her first prom night. To see her off to the prom, see her dressed up. I missed that.
When Huey and Helen were divorced in 1985, Jackie and her mother moved into an older house with front porch steps. But as Huey's friend Lena Myers reminds him, when she was young, barriers went far beyond steps.
Walker wheels up a ramp.
They just weren't equipped for a person with a disability at that time.
When Lena was 16 months old, she was run over by a truck. In an instant, her family's expectations of their daughter changed.
Well, growing up, I always see myself being a doctor, a great writer, a terrific cook, because I couldn't accept the life people had given to me. And if I told them, like, you know, one day I'm going to do so-and-so, they would say, oh, that poor child, she doesn't know what she's saying. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I wanted more. I think I was about 13. I knew absolutely nothing about guys. My sister told me that they were bad, so I should fear them, and I did. I got bored watching TV, so I taught myself. The first thing I made was a chocolate cake. After that, my mother discovered this child can cook, so I got to do all the cakes. And when it came down to making like meringue pie, she said I couldn't make it because I'm left-handed. So, of course, I had to make it better than anybody else.
Today, Lena has a thriving catering company in addition to her full-time job as an intake clerk. But her accomplishments haven't come easily.
I met a man once, and when I went to apply for a job, and I didn't even take the test or anything. He just said, oh, no, you can't do it. And he really didn't know what I could do because he didn't give me an opportunity. And I went to another place, and they said, oh, you're too short. No one will be able to see you. You know, and they didn't even, like, say, well, let's see what you can do. Let's let you take the test, or nothing. They saw the chair first, and that's all they cared about.
Justice Department files suit against the school district.
When his daughter was in elementary school, Huey found he had to file a civil rights complaint just to get Jackie's school to build a ramp.
We had a superintendent that was just really obnoxious. When I explained to him I had just the right to access to all the school activities as everybody else. And he said, well, we can always get you in. That's not the point. I want to be able to get in by myself.
Walker snaps the ends off of green beans. Now a sign outside a house, Randy's Barber Shop. Inside, men sit in barber chairs.
In retrospect, filing the civil rights complaint was a turning point. Huey's job history already included a stint as public affairs director at a radio station and as an advocacy counselor for people with disabilities. In 1982, fed up with the slow pace of change for both blacks and people with disabilities, Huey ran for the Georgetown County Council. He was the first minority elected in the county's 219-year history.
A barber trims Walker's hair.
Leery at first, his peers gradually changed their opinion of Councilman Walker.
Well, initially it was that black guy in a wheelchair. and even the newspaper, when they write about it, they would say Councilman Huey Walker, who's a disabled veteran in a wheelchair. And then as time evolved, they forgot about the wheelchair.
After 10 years on the council, Huey was elected chairman. And then, in another moment of local history, in 1993, he was appointed summary court judge.
Next, a courtroom.
Let's have order, please. Everyone rise.
Mr. Lawrence, it's my duty to inform you that you have been charged with murder on warrant E344863. It's also my duty to inform you that you have the right to remain silent. Yeah, you'll get some money.
Yeah, I've already paid for the checks.
But you haven't paid me.
Right, I understand.
Charles Bryant.
The sharecropper's stepson is now the judge.
So I need to tell you, you've been charged with driving under.
And in Judge Walker's courtroom, no discrimination of any form is tolerated.
I'm not promising I'm going to give you a plea. I'm going to take a look at it.
Yes, sir, I appreciate it.
Just outside in the hallway, though, Georgetown County's first African-American judge still can't use the water fountain because it's installed out of his reach. Is that a civil rights issue? It is to Huey.
Walker leans toward a water fountain.
When they come to realize that discrimination is wrong in any form, then they should understand. And that's what it is.
Sitting in his courtroom, Walker blinks, then licks his lips and looks down.
I mean, you can't just decide, well, discrimination is okay as long as it's not against me. You can't do that. As long as I'm protected from anything being discriminated against me, then that's fine. You can't just decide that. It has to be across the board with every segment.
And now I sign legislation which takes a sledgehammer to another wall. One which has for too many generations separated Americans with disabilities from the freedom they could glimpse but not grasp. And once again we rejoice as this barrier falls, proclaiming together, we will not accept, we will not excuse, we will not tolerate discrimination in America.
In 1990, Huey Walker was again a small part of history. Along with thousands of other people with disabilities, he watched from the White House lawn as the president signed the Americans with Disabilities Act.
I got chills, just watching the president up there with Justin Dot, and it's indescribable. I mean, a lot of us were in tears, and I don't cry very easily, but that was a moment. Yeah.
A sign, Wedding Chapel by the Sea.
You can start first, Huey.
I, Huey,
Huey,
take thee, Eloise,
take thee, Eloise,
Today is another moment.
wife,
to be my wedded wife.
This afternoon in the Wedding Chapel by the Sea, Huey marries his high school sweetheart.
you may kiss your bride.
Dark-haired Eloise leans down and kisses Walker. Walker grins and shakes hands with a man in a gray suit.
At age 48, Huey Walker still believes in every American's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
I introduce Mr. and Mrs. Huey Walker.
Eloise walks down an aisle beside the smiling Walker. He shakes hands with two men sitting in a pew. The man in the gray suit pushes Walker's wheelchair down the aisle.
Huey Walker didn't set out to change the world, but in his own way, he has. Like it or not, Huey's a role model in Georgetown County and will be until many more African Americans and people with disabilities are in positions of power. It's time, Huey says, we as a country understand that most people with disabilities aren't pitiful or heroic. We're just people, working hard and dreaming dreams. People like T.J. Monroe.
In a large conference room, a bearded man shakes a woman's hand.
Hi, my My name is TJ Monroe.
Later, a woman buffs the bearded man's shoe with a cloth.
TJ Monroe. Hello, how are you? So how long have you been doing this?
If T.J. Monroe looks like a salesman out on the road, that's exactly who he is.
So what kind of work do you do?
I'm a self-advocacy coordinator and a consultant. And I work with people with disability and people who need some help. And I'm on the President Committee for Mental Retardation.
TJ is part of a nationwide self-advocacy movement that started in the 70s.
The meeting is now in session of the workshop number 3. We are here today to make final plan of the convention this fall. Have any of you thought about another name for the theme for this year's convention?
Calling their fledgling organization People First, their 1974 convention was planned and conducted by people living at the Fairview State Hospital in Salem, Oregon.
Will the convention of the People First Round 2 please come to order? If you want this to make some kind of a sound, either clap or say yes, as loud as you can, okay?
The highlight of that two-day convention was voting on the platform. For the first time in their lives, these 200 people were setting their own agenda for change.
We want representatives on state DD council, developmentally disabilities. Do we want this? Okay, we want representatives on President Committee on Mental Retardation. Do we?
21 years later, it happened.
My name is TJ Monroe, and I'm a self-advocacy coordinator, and I work for People First.
In 1994, President Bill Clinton appointed the first person with a disability to the President's Committee on Mental Retardation, T.J. Monroe.
In the conference room, a white-haired man plays an accordion. Monroe passes out literature.
The Arc of New Mexico is holding its statewide conference at a Holiday Inn in Albuquerque.
A black-haired woman laughs.
The organization used to be called the Association for Retarded Citizens, but under pressure from self-advocates who objected to the label retarded, the name was changed to simply the ARC. TJ has been invited as a guest speaker.
I'm Diamond Bennett.
Oh, okay. I saw you sitting down on
Yeah, I'm an advisor at People First of Grants.
Oh, okay.
So,
I'm a consultant.
and this is the Robert. He's one of my members, and this is his mother, Rose.
Hey, Rose. Nice to meet you.
What can you say to Rosie to help her to
Come
feel
to my
more
workshop.
confident
Come to my workshop. You're going to learn a lot on my 2 workshops that I'm doing.
She doesn't want to let go.
Okay,
Too good.
and that's why one of the reasons why I want them to come, I'm going to show them how I did it and how parents can let go.
Less than 15 minutes after he walks into the convention, TJ decides to help Bobby, who lives at home with his parents, become more independent.
And when your mom with you, she do a lot of the talking. Why
I was being shy today.
You were shy.
Sometimes I did talk.
Are you afraid sometimes by your mom because
No.
You don't feel that way.
No, she just says I talk much if I get started talking.
You need to break your shell, correct? You need to break your shell and you need to start talking to people.
Yeah.
And like I tell your mom that I would like you to come to my workshop
She
because
says
you're going to really learn some things. Now, what kind of sport do you like?
Wrestling.
He could talk to me, but he with mom, I think he will go right back into his shyness and be afraid because he don't want to hurt your mom. I think I can get him really open up, and I think he could tell his mom what he want to do. That's a challenge for me.
Monroe smiles.
TJ is used to challenges. He was born in 1952 to working-class parents in Hartford, Connecticut. According to state records, his father was an alcoholic who abused TJ's mother. In 1954, the Connecticut Commission of Welfare placed all 4 Monroe children in foster homes. But official state records tell only part of the story.
I was small, and I didn't get treated as one of the children. I got treated as like a goose, the ugly duckling. That's how I felt. That they didn't want me around.
At first, TJ liked the song about freaks and morons his foster father sang to him.
It's to go ham bone, where you been? Down the kitchen, drink a gin, ham bone, where is way? In the corner, with the bed, ham bone, freak moron. I was laughing and I thought it was a joke. I thought it was funny. And when I found out what it stands for, I didn't like it. And so I had a hard time dealing with that for a long time.
At the age of 8, his foster parents recommended that Tommy be sent to Southbury Training School.
Mr. and Mrs. Sayers told me this was going to be like a camp. And they said you could go horseback riding, fishing, trips, and it was like a wonderful camp. And it will be with your kind of people.
Gene Bowen is a friend of TJ's who works with residents of Southbury as a self-advocacy advisor.
This particular institution was built in the late 30s and opened in the early 40s, 1940s. And the idea was that you'd have a farm and the kids would come and they'd romp and, you know, it would be a great place. But it wasn't a great place. When you got up here, you were expecting horseback riding.
Yes, horseback riding, fishing.
Yeah. What did the horseback riding turn into?
Seeing them. This is the first cottage that I came in when I was 8 years old. And the first bed that I was at was right here, facing this way, and it was a crib. And this whole thing was filled with cribs, beds. So I used to get out of my crib and I used to walk the hallway. Then later on, they put a net over my crib so I won't get out.
So then when you managed to figure out how to get out of the crib,
I used to bite through the net.
what you put?
Okay.
And what did they do then?
Then they
kind
put
of
a big straitjacket on me and then tie me in my bed and put another net over me. So I got, no, 2 times they put 2 nets on me and I still got out of it.
How did you get out of the straitjacket?
That was too big, so I wiggled myself out.
Right.
And then they figure out they had another smaller one, so they put the small one and I couldn't get out of that one. And it only happened 5 times till then I broke the habit not getting out of my skin.
In a photo, beds line a room.
TJ arrived here in its boom years. It was a thriving facility. It was respected, highly regarded. Of institutional models, it was the best. It quickly became very crowded. It was around 1,800 to 2,000 kids and teenagers and young adults.
On his 10th birthday, TJ was taken across campus to Cottage 9 and introduced to Peggy Monroe, a sister he never even knew he had.
My number was 3328. My sister was 3329. Me and her looked like the same and everything, but I didn't really think that was my sister. I didn't take that in for a long, long time.
As the number of residents grew, so did the problems.
My own opinion is that anytime you put together a large segregated facility, you're headed for trouble. You put a couple of thousand people in the same buildings and you're headed for big trouble.
According to dozens of former residents, during TJ's 11 years at Southbury, many people were physically beaten and sexually molested by staff members.
Some of the staff like somebody. Then they used to take you to they would take you to the hospital and back of the hospital, and they had sex with you. And you had to do it by the staff. The staff want you to do it. You couldn't tell anyone else. And if they find out, you get punished.
A photo of long white buildings on a roof, Southbury, Connecticut.
In a field behind the barn, TJ says, at least 2 people who could no longer tolerate the abuses of Southbury asked their friends to help them commit suicide by hanging.
Nighttime. 2 flashlight beams play across leaf-covered ground.
Hanging tree was a tree, like a regular tree, and they had rope, and they used to hang the people who don't want to do anything, they hang themselves.
a thick horizontal tree branch.
They watch the stuff, they watch the movement, and if the night man used to sleep or something, and they go out and they have a couple guys and they just link the rope.
A noose hangs over the branch.
And the guys doing the feet, and sometimes they don't even do that. Some of the guys just know how to break the guy's neck, and they put them in the loop, and then they bring them back inside and put them in the bed.
Now a silhouette of a dangling person.
Friends put bed sheets around the person's neck, and after they were dead, smuggled the body back into bed to hide the cause of death from staff and spare the feelings of relatives.
A flashlight beam illuminates the empty noose.
It's a lot of bad memories, but it's a lot of good memories. So I can't really, I wish there was a lot of people out of here. Yeah, I do. Because what the hell is going on, it's that it sucks.
A cartoon.
This say, don't ever give up. What one is me? Is this me or is this me? The fog, that's the staff in an institution. I'm wringing his neck because he ate my friends, but he's not going to eat me. So I hold that back.
The audience for TJ's workshop includes people now living in group homes and people still living with their parents.
How many people are afraid to let the children go, adult, to go on their own?
Bobby's mom, Rose, raises one hand.
Okay. And I want to ask another question for them. Why? My question is why? Are you afraid that something's going to happen to them? Or are you afraid that they're not going to make it? Both. Most of the time, parents, you protect your children very well, but they're not children anymore. They are very adults, and we need to treat them as adults. And we need to start asking them what they want. What else do you need to be ready to go out in the community? Yes?
Training.
Yes, training. And who are you going to get the training from?
Our parents.
Your parents? Are they ready to do it?
I'm not sure yet.
Why don't you ask? She's right. Okay, you're not sure. Well, she's right there. Why don't you ask her if she's ready to do it?
Are you ready to train me?
Rose nods.
Okay.
Later, an empty lecture hall.
I did it. Yes, I did it. I did it. I did it.
TJ's own history of independence was equally difficult. In 1971, 19-year-old Tommy Monroe was finally released from Southbury.
The institution was like my mom and my dad. And now I'm going to go out into the community. It was scary for me because it told me if I did anything wrong, I would be back.
TJ moved into a group home of 15 men in Torrington, Connecticut. And the next day he started work at Lark Industries, a sheltered workshop. The possibility of a job for TJ in the community wasn't even considered.
My first paycheck was $35, and we have to give the money back to the group home. You can take the money out, and it was cash. I remember you. You remember me? My sister was Peggy Monroe.
Yeah, I know her. She had Cottage 10.
What?
Tommy Monroe.
Yes.
Bob Petrie has worked at Lark for 13 years.
And you still live at the same place, or did you move?
No, I moved.
You moved.
After 40 years in Southbury and 2 years in a group home, Bob decided to move into his own apartment. His social worker disapproved.
I said, no, you can't. So I told him, someday I go out on my own. So I told him, he told me, you'll be back 2 months. I said, you think about that? And when I went on my own, and I went back.
I think a lot of the people want the same that everybody else get, and they want to be equal. And if we're not equal, then why are we here?
Everybody in this room can have the right to get married, to have a license, and to have friends. You can get married if you want to. Right now, I'm not married. I'm 42 years old. I still have things in my head that I want to do before I do get married.
How you doing? How you doing?
Before he settles down, TJ wants to settle into his new job as a kitchen manager at a senior center in Cincinnati.
You want some more potatoes?
I'm out in the community working, trying to show people who I am.
Potatoes.
Monroe walks through a dining room.
In return for 20 hours of work a week, he has his own apartment in the building. But even after 17 years of living on his own, moving is still a struggle for TJ. A process full of hope and fear. It's the same for Bobby and his mother, Rose.
I'm not a very bold or aggressive person, and it's hard for me to get my feelings out. And going to these things, I'm admitting that I have to break out and let him break out. I'm not doing that.
When you came to the conference, how did you really felt? I mean, when you came and you went to my first workshop.
I felt scared.
Okay.
Because I know I was going to hear something that I didn't want to hear. And things that I haven't wanted to hear for years that I had to let go.
So what do you think when you're going home? What you're going to do?
Try to show my mom that I can do stuff by myself. Like fold my clothes, that's one of the problems I have. I can't fold my clothes right. And then later on they come in my room and get mad at me because it's all wrinkled.
I've shown him 100 times, and he can't figure out why he can't learn it.
Okay, can I show you how? Okay.
Next, Bobby watches as Monroe folds a pair of jeans.
Let me show you one, and then you and me do it, okay? Do he do it like this? Take this end and this end together?
Uh-huh.
And then do he go like this?
Monroe holds the ends of the pants legs.
Well, what I do is I go like this first, because it goes here. Then I put this one here, and then I go this.
Oh, that
like
would be easier.
Okay. And then I go like this, and it's...
Monroe lays down the jeans and presses the legs together.
It folds, and then some of you don't have a hanger, I just do like this.
Working on a hotel room bed, he folds the jeans twice.
And it's ready for it to go. Do you want to try it?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's unbutton this for you. Okay. Let's see if you can...
Button it up.
Yep.
Rose watches as Bobby buttons the jeans.
Very good.
Bobby holds the jeans upside down.
Then get all the lines.
Yep.
Bobby lines up the cuffs of the legs.
Where's that?
Yes.
Bobby folds the jeans in half. Monroe smiles at Rose.
Okay.
That's only showed you 100 times.
Now, you got to go home and you get a pair of pants just like this. Okay? And show your father what you can do now. Are you happy?
Yeah.
Later, Monroe moves his fists apart.
Right here, we start right from here. And then we went from this, right? And now we out like this for his mother. Because she almost was crying. I mean, you could tell in her voice that she had tears. And I don't know, and she broke her shell. And now she's just seeing me showing her son how to do a pair of picks. That's why. And I just got the gift inside me that I can do that to help people.
Now a conference.
Hello. My name is Thomas James Monroe, and I was in a state institution for 11 years, and I have a number on me. I did. It was 3328. The bottom line is showing people that they are equal, and they have rights just like everybody else. Thank you. I'm not saying I'm a perfect person. I make mistakes, just like anyone else. But when I make mistakes, I try to not try to do it again.
And that, in the final analysis, is what people with disabilities really want. Simply the right to try on a leveled playing field. As time passes, the ADA is changing the face of America. Traveling around the country, I notice an increasing number of ramps and curb cuts. I see more Braille signs in elevators and TTY telephones being used by deaf people in airports. And in 1994, Work was completed here, finally making Constitution Hall accessible.
Marian Anderson performs at the Lincoln Memorial.
Half a century after Marian Anderson's historic concert on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, the definition of equal rights for all Americans continues to expand. President Bill Clinton.
The ADA is part of the seamless web of civil rights that so many have worked for so long to build in America. For almost 1 billion persons with disabilities around the world, it stands as a symbol of simple justice and inalienable human rights.
Monroe talks to a man using a wheelchair. Next, DePreist at the Lincoln Memorial.
I'm James DePreist. Thank you for joining us.
From every mountainside, let freedom ring.
Host James DePreist, producer-writer Phyllis Ward.
My country 'tis of thee.
A listing of credits follows.
Sweet, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing.
Description created by NCI, Described Media. This is Joel Snyder.